This is the Rookie Big Board Rookie Profile Series. I'm your host, Matt Hicks, the FF Educator, joined by John Lobb, the Gridiron Scholar. This is the Devon Achane Rookie Profile. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you are not already, and drop us a comment. Let us know how you feel about Devon Achane, because he is certainly an electric, but also a little bit of a controversial prospect here. If you want to get more insight and info past this video on Devon Achane and the rest of the 2023 draft class, you want to get access to the Rookie Big Board and the Rookie Big Board Discord, head on over to patreon.com/Rookie Big Board. Here we go, John. Devon Achane out of Texas A&M, the running back.
I've watched a ton of Texas A&M, which could be like watching dry paint. But I've had to watch that offense because for 3 years I was watching Isaiah Spiller and Jalen Wiedemeyer, the tight end. And then I did end up watching Devon Achane a ton, Matt. We did a Devy show on him, I believe it was 2 summers ago, and we talked about him last year. I really like Devon Achane. I drafted him a ton in my college fantasy football leagues, and he was amazing on the field. But there is a concern later that I'll talk about. I'll do a little foreshadowing. But who is this young man from a prospect profile? In high school, he was another 4-star recruit, number 55 player in the nation, and number 8 in the state of Texas. More importantly, Matt, he was the number 1 all-purpose back in the country. So what they saw in high school, he has brought it into the college career. During high school, he rushed for over 2,000 yards on 185 attempts. So he didn't get a lot of carries in high school. And there's a reason why, probably. He averaged 11.3 yards per carry, Matt. Not receptions, 11.3 yards per carry. He had 38 touchdowns. He also had 32 receptions for 694 yards and 10 more touchdowns. So you see the all-purpose resume as it occurred in high school. In 2019, he was named Touchdown Club of Houston Offensive Player of the Year honors. So he ends up going to College Station, Matt, with all kinds of hoopla, but at the time they had Isaiah Spiller in the backfield for them. As a true freshman with Spiller as the bell cow, he had 43 carries for 364 yards. He averaged 8.5 yards per carry. There's a trend here, everyone. And he had 4 touchdowns. He only had 5 receptions for 97 yards and a touchdown. They didn't throw him the ball a lot as a freshman. He ended up the season on a very high note, Matt. He had a season high 140 yards and 2 touchdowns against North Carolina in the Aggies Orange Bowl victory. And he was named the most outstanding player in the game. And then in 2021, he really exploded as a college fantasy football and even more as an NFL draft prospect. 130 carries, 910 yards, 9 touchdowns. He again illustrated, like in high school, his pass-catching chops, 24 receptions for 261 yards and a touchdown. He led the SEC and was top 11 in the country in yards per attempt with 7 yards per carry. He led the Aggies with 11 total touchdowns, including at least 1 as a rusher, a returner, and a receiver. At the end of the season, at the team's annual banquet, he earned the Offensive Most Explosive Award and the Special Teams Most Impactful Award. This is an all-purpose runner with an amazing prospect resume for the NFL. Last summer, before kickoff, if you had any question about his athleticism, he was named the Bruce Feldman's Freaks list at number 35. So we liked him last summer. People were talking about him as an NFL draft prospect. And last year, Matt, he was great again. 196 carries, over 1,100 yards rushing, 8 touchdowns. He also had 36 receptions for 196 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he had a career high 1,298 yards from scrimmage. He was all SEC first team at running back, All SEC first team all-purpose player. He led the conference as ranked fourth nationally, averaging 161 all-purpose yards per game. Once again, he was named the offensive MVP and special teams most impactful player. Matt, amazing production model and resume. What does your film study say about Devon Achane?
Achane has unmatched breakaway speed. The conversation needs to be centered around that speed. He is somebody, John, who displays that as a running back, like you mentioned, after the catch, as a receiving option, and certainly in special teams as well. You know, you watch him return some of these kicks, John. It's hard to stay in your seat. Like, it is exciting to watch. That ability to run well in a straight line is balanced nicely with some good lateral movement. I don't think he's going to be confused as the best lateral movement guy in the class, but he certainly has the ability to move east and west as well. And John, I have to say, one of the things I love about Achane's tape is his physicality holds up pretty well against SEC defenders for his size. It's going to be a really interesting one. The conversation's going to be swirling here, and we'll know an answer depending on when you're listening to this episode. But the size for Devon Achane could be a huge bump to his draft stock, because I think the idea now is that he's going to come in under 195. But if he surprises folks, then we might, have even more confidence around that physicality holding up at the next level. I think one thing that's underrated when it comes to Achane's tape is that in tight space, he's slippery, right? Like, he's elusive. He will scoop past defenders. And so, when I'm looking at him, I'm seeing breakaway speed, and I'm seeing a guy who wins in multiple ways in between the tackles. That's pretty exciting for me in terms of his film. If he gets to the second level of the field, John, it's over, right? So that's the goal as a defense, is do not let this guy get the ball at the second level of the field, because it will be a touchdown. And that type of upside has to be exciting for fantasy football purposes. Now, I will say, in terms of his downsides, he's not creating a ton of his own space, which isn't fantastic, but it also, isn't necessarily limiting. It just means his landing spot in the offensive line he's behind become a little bit more critical maybe than some other prospects who we would feel more confident being able to produce in a vacuum and create their own space in their own yards. So with Achane, it's going to be even more interesting to see the scheme he fits in. And it's going to be interesting, John, to see how the NFL team he lands with wants to use him. Because I think his skill set here on tape suggests that he could, be a guy that gets 200 plus touches a season. But I also see somebody who, you might want to keep the tires fresh, right? And only give him 100 to 175 touches a season, which from a fantasy football perspective is much, much less appealing. For me, John, when I watch the tape, I'm convinced he's going to be a good NFL player, but I do think there's questions about what's that fantasy football translation, and maybe looking at his college numbers will give us a little bit clearer of a picture.
Matt, I do believe he'll have a bigger impact as an NFL playmaker than he will as a fantasy football, competitor on your roster. And here's why. I've talked about this a lot, and I trust my model and I look at the numbers. He's now listed at 185, 5'9". I think this young man at the combine has the absolute most to win. If he shows up at 195 to 200, Matt, that's going to make a big difference on how I look at him. And here's why. We've discussed this before, Matt. In the last 3 years, to finish in the top 24 in PPR scoring, only 2 players were under 200 pounds. Let me repeat that. Out of 72 players, only 2 of the top 24 finishers were under 200 pounds. Even Eckler is 200. So that's a big number in my model. I also, for all my old school viewers, I have visions. Check out Terry Metcalf of the Cardinals in the 1970s and Dave Meggett of the Giants in the 1980s. Devon Achane reminds me of those 2 young men who are spectacular difference makers on their NFL teams, but were not necessarily top fantasy stars and did not, they're not Hall of Famers, but they were great football players, Matt. So I feel like that's where Devon Achane is in my production model and how I look at the position. And I love him, Matt. I want him to be Terry Metcalf. Folks, look at the numbers of those Cardinals teams. Terry Metcalf's a very good player. Rushing yards, 2,376. My model likes that in the SEC. Total scrimmage yards, 1,298. What my model loves, Matt, look at that yards per carry, 6.4. And I was actually a little surprised by this. His scrimmage yards dominator for a smaller back, 30%. I don't see him doing that at the NFL level. I think a smart coach and coordinator limit his touches, punts, kicks, receptions, carries, limit him to 15, and you could get incredible efficiency with this young man. 65 career receptions. Matt, my model likes him, but the red flag is the size. And I can't wait. I know this is weird, right? I'm waiting to see what he weighs. Like, I can't wait until Twitter just busts out. I think he's going to be one of the biggest trending players at the combine because we all want to see what he weighs in. Matt, what does the fantasy football universe need to know about Devon Achane?
John, one of the things I do to get an idea of draft capital, in addition to collecting as much information as I can, reaching out to folks, listening to folks, I do a lot of mock drafts, right? Just do my own 7-round mock drafts. And one thing I keep finding myself surprised with is there's a lot of good fits for Devon Achane in the 40s. And so I've recently bumped up his projection. I think he's going day 1 late to day 2 mid, 21 to 50 overall, right? Especially if we get Bijan and Gibbs off the board early, because, John, of the versatility he brings to the NFL team, that special teams ability and that ability to almost be, I can just see one of these good NFL offenses with a solid running back already using him as, quote unquote luxury weapon added to their offense, right?
The Raiders.
Right. Yeah.
So
but I think what that's going to do, John, is drive up his ADP. If he's a top 50 pick, I think he's going to land in the 201 to 204 ADP range, an early 2nd round pick. And I talk about all the time the value that sometimes will creep over into the 2nd round. I wouldn't love this value, right? Because of what we've talked about. I love the player. I don't love the fit for fantasy football. And that's part of what we're evaluating here, right? We're not just telling you that everybody's a great prospect. We're trying to put it into the context of fantasy football and help you make sense of it, right? And so for that reason, I don't think I'm going to have too much Devon Achane, if any Devon Achane at all. I think it's going to be a low exposure. And John, I could kind of see his value landing in a spot with James Cook. And I'm not drawing a 1-to-1 a trait comparison at all. But when I'm talking about a fantasy football value comp, this is somebody who is going to carry value, right? Like James Cook is carrying value right now as a running back to potential flex type guy because of the upside that he brings to an offense. But we're not sure if he's ever going to get the volume really to demand being a running back 1. And I think Devon Achane is going to fit in a similar value spot. I like Achane. I like him even more as an NFL player. I like him a little bit less as a fantasy football option, John. But you know what I love? I love the value of the rookie big board. So you're going to want to make sure you get in on the Discord, on the rookie big board draft guide, on the rankings, all of the resources we're putting out for just $3 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rookiebigboard to get in on the action. And as always, we appreciate you checking out this episode of the Rookie Big Board.